On maps, the Rother levels are clearly marked, close to the northwest of the Romney and Walland marshes on the borders of Kent and Sussex. Locally, there's controversy about the precise position of the levels, perhaps because the age-old traditions go back to the days when the river radically changed its course in the Great Storm of 1287. Whatever the arguments about geography, few would deny that this is dramatic and beautiful countryside, steeped in the rugged romance and history of smuggling, press gangs, and the unending battle against the invading sea. The eastern or Kentish Rother rises at Rotherfield, swings towards the Kent border, and enters the English Channel below Rye. Along these county lines lie the approaches to the Garden of England and the beauty of the fruit orchards. On the levels themselves, sheep rule with their foam fleeces and the tang of salt in their meat. And the people who live here, the descendants of the old marsh men and women, are as private and as resilient as you would expect them to be. Rivers are always important, but nowhere more so than on the Rother levels and the Romney Marsh, where a storm can lead to catastrophe and flooding for farmers and villagers alike. Barry Green is the lockkeeper at Scott's Float on the River Rother, soon before its junction with the Royal Military Canal. His life is on the waterways, and when he can find the time, he loves to fish them with his family.
Right, keep your rod tipped down then, Joe. Line under the water, because when it's windy like this, you've got to keep your line under the surface, okay? For me, the important thing about fishing is solitude and the chances of watching wildlife.
Okay.
That's lovely. Those boys there, hopefully, going to turn out to be fishermen the same as me. The main reason being is that if they're fishing, they're not up to anything else that they shouldn't be.
If it disappears over a high wave, I'll know that's not a fish.
Where's that float gone, Chris? Romney Marsh is best fishing in the country. All kinds of species, mainly carp, tench and bream, which is basically what I go for. Smaller stuff, fine for the young children, fish every cast just about. Right, strike, Joe. Yes, you're in, well done. Well done, mate. Wind him in to your feet, careful.
Yeah, it's a blooming old one.
Careful, well done.
That was good.
Basic responsibility of my job is to keep the tide from flooding back across the marsh. I have to be on call for the year because incorporated within the sluice there is a boat lock, mainly used by pleasure craft, and it's also used for people coming in either from abroad or from Rye Harbour to go upstream to have a look at the River Rother. The nightmare is that you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't remember whether you've shut sluice gates. The main reason being is if the tide comes in, and it's a large tide, possibly affected by wind or atmospheric pressure, you can have up to 2 metres of salt water rushing across most of the marsh.
Wind enough for you, Russ? I thought there would be. Stand by then and I'll shut you in.
One of the jobs I do regularly here, especially through the winter months, is brushing. This involves the use of a scythe to cut away reeds from the bank edge and whatever grows actually in the channel to maintain a regular flow of water. A thoroughly miserable task at best of times. It's been carried out ever since the marsh was reclaimed from the sea. It has to be done regularly. Luckily these days we do less of it than we used to.
He has 5 children, 15 grandchildren, and 17 great-grandchildren. But instead of taking things easy now, he's up at all hours, working with the flowers and vegetables, caring for and feeding the animals, and serving in the small farm shop. He's a fund of local knowledge, wisdom, and age-old stories.
There was an old chap who used to live in Beckley. He used to go up to Royal Oak every night in the summer, get his half a pint, and his old dog used to be 10 yards behind. I should think he waddled along. He was getting old. He was about 16-year-old. And I said to the old chap one night, I said, "Old dog gets slower, don't you, Jack?" He said, "Yes, I can remember when she run and catch a rabbit." But he said, "Now, the faster she goes, the further she gets behind." And I thought that was a bit silly. But since I got on a bit, I think that's quite true, because the faster I go now, the further I get behind. I think that's right. When I was a young lad, there was 51 farmers in Beckley, and now there's 10 farmers in Beckley left. And in those times, there was over 80 cart horses. Now there's not one. And that ain't awfully good, I don't think, to you. I don't ring to worry over anything, but say if I got a cow calving out in the field anywhere, and I hadn't been and looked at it, and in the morning there's something wrong, I think, well, I've done something that I hadn't ought to have done. I ought to go on and sin to it. That sort of thing worries me, because I hadn't done it properly. If I go out in the field and look at some sheep, I don't see the good ones, I only see the bad ones. And that's just something, the instinct tells you what's wrong and what's right. But it's just something that's bred in you, or it comes to you. That's all I can say about that. In 87 years of my life, I've only had one holiday, and that was 3 days. I went to Scotland. Couldn't understand what they was talking about, and after they'd had a few drinks, I couldn't understand nothing. And no, I didn't think much of that, so I was glad to get home.
Okay, in there, I'll have a dozen eggs, please.
Yes. My father-in-law, he was a police sergeant down here. And he always used to say there was only 2 things in life he wanted to see, and then he didn't mind if he didn't see no more. And you say, "What's that?" He said, "A dead donkey and a satisfied farmer." I said, "No, I've never seen one, and a lot of people never have. You will see a happy farmer, but not a satisfied one."
Okay.
They say that there are always good pubs in smuggling country. The Red Lion at Snargate proves the rule. Here, Doris Jemison and her daughter Kate keep up a family tradition which goes back to 1911, when the Jemisons first came here. Doris herself arrived a mere 41 years ago and has been going strong ever since.
My father-in-law, he took the pub as a tenant in 1911, and he never changed the place. And he was licensee for 63 years. Then when he died, my husband became landlord, and he said no way would he change it. This is a drinking parlour, and that's how it will stay. Well, my husband died 6 years ago, and I'm keeping his wish and keeping it the same. One of the games we play here is called Toad in the Hole, and this is an old Sussex game, I am led to believe, and people thoroughly enjoy it. They think it's different, strange, they've not seen it before, lots of them, and they do enjoy the game, play it all the time.
Well, it's 17, isn't it? and...
I do hope that my daughter Kate will take over the pub and keep it going. My husband decided before he died that he didn't want it to go out of the family, and I'm trying to keep it that way.
Marry me.
Sometimes in the summer, local Morris dancers come and perform in the road in front of the Red Lion.
I came from London, but that's not my home anymore. This is. Always will be. What I love is a huge sky, freedom, space.
The forge in Appledore has stood beside the high street for centuries. Smugglers' ponies, as well as the horses of soldiers sent to guard the Royal Military Canal against an anticipated invasion by Napoleon, must all have been shod here. Ray Moseley trained as a shoeing smith almost half a century ago, and came to Appledore with his wife 34 years ago. Today, he's given up horses, but still plies his trade to great and artistic effect.
Blacksmithing, I think you have to have a feel for what you want to complete. I like things to look as near as possible to the originals, knowing that metalwork has its limitations. I suppose that you need a certain amount of physical strength, but it's not so much that you brute force. You've got to be gentle with metal, and after all, when metal's hot, it's very ductile. It will move very easily. There was only a few horses here when I came, and they were quite a useful job because there was very little work when I originally started here in Appledore. I think the one thing that sparks a little is when the children come and say, do you still shoe horses? And I say, no, I don't shoe horses anymore. And they will say, oh, you're not a real blacksmith then. Terry, who at the moment is working on a circular bench to go round a tree for a customer, came to me about 7 years ago, I think it is now. He's a very useful man to have, as he is in fact a fitter welder, and this works very well with the blacksmithing skills that I have. I will do the forging and Terry will build. As with gates, he will build the framework, and then I will make the pieces that go into it. So mostly everything in the forge that's made, we do work together on. I think there's a certain amount of feeling you get in an old premises where you know that great craftsmen have worked there in the past of all types. And one feels you're carrying on something that has always been. And certainly from the point of view of working in a forge which has been there for so many years, you're still carrying on a little bit of history.
On Appledore Heath, Joyce Smith keeps her goats, including a huge billy which looks as if it could see off a pack of Rottweilers and Pit Bull Terriers. The goats graze the summer grass and think sweet thoughts. Up at her house, Joyce earns her living grooming and pampering, polishing and clipping local dogs. It's a skill which she learnt as a kennel maid before the war, and she's made dogs an important part of her life ever since.
Come on, Beth. Come on. Oh, Marilyn, she's putting on weight. She'll have to diet her or something. Too many chocolates. Yeah, that's right. Too many chocolates. I think perhaps there's something telepathic about dogs and myself, because I can see a dog across the road and think that's a nice little chap, and it'll look at me and wag its tail as if it knows I'm talking to it. I think that dogs know what you're thinking half the time. Bye-bye. See you presently. Right, now, Precious. For this job, you need a love of dogs to start off with, and the patience to cope with a difficult dog. You don't need to have any fear of a dog, because if you're frightened of the dog knows, and it'll bite you. You need to have a knowledge of all breeds, how they should look, because a dog might come in and all covered in fur, and it might be a wild fox terrier, or it might be a poodle, it might be almost anything. You've got to know what it is, and know what it should look like when you've finished it.
Mrs. Owen, what can I do for you? Can I make an appointment for Cindy, please?
Yes, she does look a bit tatty, doesn't she?
She does.
Yeah. They help you to some normal sort of living. You pet them and stroke them when you feel, to touch something, to give comfort. Whereas you can't always go up to a person and say, oh, I want a bit of loving or something. They satisfy a need in me, at any rate. And I think they do in a lot of people.
Do you want a shampoo as well as a
Sit still. No, stand still. Most dogs dislike the bath, yes. They nearly all dislike that and try to get out. No, come on. No, we're not jumping over the bath. Come on. If I've got a big dog that is keen to get out of the bath, then I get pretty nearly drowned. Well, I think dogs, or they're companions to start off with. They never answer you back. They never sulk when you're cross with them, not like people do. Some people say, oh, well, give me a dog any day and I don't like people, but I like people as well. But dogs are always there for you. They never sort of spurn you. It doesn't matter what you do to them, they still come back and love you.
Carpenter by trade and natural historian by nature, Melvyn Smith lives in the village of Wittersham in Kent, with its elegant windmill and the Sussex border just 3/4 of a mile away. One of Melvyn's passions is to collect and restore old tools and rural bygones. When he's not away on a building job, he also crafts fine elm stools, which he makes in the good old-fashioned way.
There we are, Jim. Well-built item, used in the marshes, fitted to the bottom of the sole of your boot.
Oh, so you've got bottom protection rather than toe protection as you'd have nowadays.
That's right. If you're using the spade a lot, you didn't want the spade to wear up through the sole of your boot, so you put that on. Boot protector.
And the marshman's life, I guess, was a lot of digging.
A lot of digging, yes. And after you've done the digging, if you needed to clean out a big dike or perhaps a canal, like the military canal we've got along the bottom of the marsh, you'd use a mud truck. Mud would be scooped like that.
Oh, fantastic.
Thrown up onto the bank. Of course, it wasn't all work. You could have some play. And if you was a proper marshman, you could use one of these.
Very fearsome objects, aren't they?
That's an eel shear.
Shear?
Shear, yes. Some places they're known as spears, but we're known as eel shears this way on. This is a Sussex design.
Yeah. And this one?
This is, that's a Norfolk design, an East Anglian design. The idea was to spear eels in the mud. Initially, I was brought up on a small holding. Father and an elderly uncle who we had living with us then, they both used a lot of hand tools. I've always used tools. I used tools in my job as a carpenter. And the wife's grandfather, when he died, his tools came to me, and gradually the collection's built up. Generally, they need restoring. Some need a lot of restoration, others need just perhaps cleaning. The main tool I use to work the elm is the adze, one of the oldest hand tools there is, going right back to probably the Egyptians. one of the most dangerous too, because you need a very sharp edge, and if your adze in, or very often need to stand actually on the piece of timber on adze in, so you're working within perhaps an inch or two of your own feet. People sometimes ask me how many times do I miss with the adze, and my answer always is the same: how many feet have I got? Because you only miss once with the adze. I find there's a very thin line between restoration and replica. How much restoration must you do before it becomes a replica? It's a bit like the story of the carpenter who claimed to have the same hammer for all of his work in life, and the only repairs needed were 2 new heads and 3 new handles. I use elm because, as you say, it is so durable. It doesn't split. And they used to use elm for making coffins, and down in the marshes, a lot of hollow elm logs were used for drainage pipes. So it just shows how durable the elm was. I was born on the edge, on the southern edge of the marsh, the Rother levels, and I now live on the northern edge, you see, so perhaps not quite a marshman, but certainly the marsh is in through the veins as such.
In her county book, Barbara Willard writes movingly about the people who have nurtured and built these southeast counties of England over the generations. The names on shops and business premises now are the names on tombstones and wall tablets and floor slabs. The same families hold the manors, time and again, who have held them for centuries. The church wardens, the bell ringers, the farmers, all their names are familiar, and you can trace them as they move about the county, losing a son to a distant parish, a daughter to the other side of the river where her name is recalled on a tomb. These people hold the county supported, bound up in a web they've never ceased adding to, strand by strand, since they came down from the hill forts and the settlements,